all starts in the http.conf configuration file with the name virtual host directive. Use the IP address on the network card connected to the network you want to serve. For example, in my case, that IP address is 192.168.0.30. And I gotta keep the 80 as the port number, as I'm going to create a secure virtual host on port 443 in another video. Next, I take the commented virtual host container and use it as a template. I did it as simply as possible. In other words, I substituted vh1.example.net for dummy-host.example.com. vh1 stands for virtual host 1. Of course, with this document root, I have to create this directory, and I also will need to create a index.html file. While you could create it in HTML format, that's not necessary. Text files work fine for our purposes. See the simple test I added to that file. To check my work, the httpd-t command works as a syntax checker. Don't worry about that message. That's a common message for networks that do not have a DNS server. I also run the httpd-s, that's a capital S command. That verifies I've configured an appropriate virtual host. Of course, you have to make sure that the regular and, if necessary, the secure ports for web servers are open through your firewall. And that's easily configured with the security level configuration tool, which I've described in several other videos. But don't forget the effective security enhanced Linux. To make this work, we need to configure the same context as the default Apache document root directory, var/www/html. I've described how to look up and change it with the chcon command in other videos. But here's a tip. You can do it more easily with the reference switch. I use the reference switch to refer to the directory with the context I want. I use the -R switch for recursive changes. So this particular command, chcon -r recursive reference equals var/www/html, takes the security enhanced Linux context from the reference directory and apply it to the www directory and subdirectories and individual files. Check the result. Run the ls-Z command on the www directory as well as the var/www directory. The security enhanced Linux contexts match up fine. To make sure Apache reads the configuration changes, I could use the httpd script in the etc/init.d directory. I could restart the service, or I could reload the service. I can even use the Apache control command. For variety, let's use that. Now I log into a remote system. And if necessary, I change the DNS server or the etc host configuration file. see how I've added vh1.example.net to that file with the IP address I cited earlier. Now I use the elinks browser to navigate to vh1.example.net. And how about that? I have my first virtual host. Now let's create a second virtual host. It's easy enough to do. I've created a virtual host for a URL vh2.example.net. I did the same things that I did before, instead substituting vh2.example.net for vh1.example.net. I save the changes. I test the syntax again with the commands described earlier. I have a good virtual host for vh2.example.net. I have an appropriate setting in my etc/host configuration file. And if I know how to type, I can verify the result. It was vh2example.net. And there it is. This is the website for VirtualHost 2.